NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has called on all 32 member states to commit more funding, equipment and political energy to the world's largest military alliance as the United States steps back from its traditional leadership role in European security. In a new Secretary-General's report, Rutte notes that NATO countries increased their defense spending by nearly 10.5% in 2024 compared to the previous year. 23 member states have now met the target of spending 2% of their GDP on defense. For years, defense budgets were barely discussed in many EU capitals, but now the time has changed. Mounting pressure from Washington, along with growing uncertainty over America's NATO commitments, has pushed European leaders to adopt an €800 billion rearmament plan this year. More on this in our next report. US President Donald Trump's demand that European allies raise military spending to 5% of GDP, more than double NATO's current target, is causing growing concern among European leaders. In Spain, officials have said that almost no country in the world can meet that demand. In 2024, Spain spent just 1.3% of its GDP on defense, the lowest among NATO members. But Europe may have little choice. Madrid has already announced plans to meet the 2% benchmark 4 years ahead of schedule by the end of this year.
Spain will reach 2% of its gross domestic product in security and defense this year, 2025. This requires an important additional investment of €10 billion beyond current allocations for these policies of defense and security.
The trend is clear. Europe, though reluctantly, is shifting toward accelerated rearmament. Brussels is now weighing collective solutions to help share the financial burden among EU members. One proposal, informally dubbed Rearm Europe, involves relaxing EU fiscal rules and issuing joint debt to unlock up to €800 billion for defense over 4 years. The idea is that a dedicated European defense fund could borrow from military spending without increasing the national debt of individual countries. It's a particularly appealing option for southern EU members with high debt levels. Italy, for example, with public debt exceeding 135% of GDP, is willing to raise its defense spending, but doing so would place a heavy strain on its economy, the experts stressed.
Clearly, Italy has planned to repay its public debt in the coming years. Therefore, if the budget needs to be adjusted to increase loans for defense spending, there may be concerns about the sustainability of Italy's public debt. This worry already exists within the Italian government, with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expressing significant worries about debt sustainability. Other ruling parties, such as the Lega Nord, have been greater doubts about the European defense plan.
However, not all European countries are pushing back against Donald Trump's call for higher defense spending. Lithuania, in fact, is fully on board and ready to go further than anyone else. Starting in 2026, the country plans to raise its defense budget to an unprecedented 5.5% of GDP. The Lithuanian defense minister has urged the EU to lift all the restrictions on borrowing for defense and to provide immediate grants to member states. She also expressed hope that NATO allies will agree on a new target of at least 4% of GDP during the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague in this June.
We need to pull our weight as Europe. Europe is financially not investing adequately in defense. When we look at the construction of NATO, when we look at economic capacity of United States and Europe, and then the percentage and the size of funds that are allocated for defense, Europe needs to do more. And this is not the matter of we need to do it now. We already needed to do it yesterday. We are basically late. So when we are sometimes critical of United States, I think that mirror is the best helper also to make certain conclusions about ourselves.
What if the US leaves NATO? In Germany, officials are already preparing for that possibility. President Frank-Walter Steinmeier said this week that Germany will take on a stronger military role within the alliance and boost its contribution to Europe's defense. Speaking at NATO's headquarters in Brussels to mark Germany's anniversary of joining the alliance, Steinmeier sought to reassure allies unsettled by what he called epochal geopolitical shifts. Under Berlin's new financial strategy, a €500 billion fund is being set up to modernize infrastructure, including defense. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte called Germany's plan remarkable.
Just recently, the German parliament changed the constitution to massively increase its defense spending. This is remarkable. Another clear demonstration of German leadership. There was a time when NATO wanted to keep the Germans down, as NATO's first Secretary General famously said. Not anymore. The Germans are up. And this is exactly what we need in the face of greater danger.
And yet, despite all the rhetoric, new data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute reveals just how difficult it will be for Europe to stand on its own. Nearly 2/3 of all weapons purchased by European NATO members between 2020 and 2024 came from the United States. Still, times are changing, and for Europe, the era of minimal defense spending appears to be over. Daurinas Agulov, New Time.